Hey yo, what's up, everybody? This is Tim Hart. You're listening to Obsessed with Wrestling podcast, episode 2. I am joined today by my partner, Joe Caruana. Don't forget to join us on Twitter at OWW Podcast, as well as our Facebook page, obsessedwithwrestling.com. Search that in the search bar on Facebook. You'll find it. You could also find these podcasts on YouTube, Obsessed with Wrestling. Joe, how was your week?
Hey, pretty good. Glad it's Sunday.
Sunday, of course, means that we just had a very entertaining week in pro wrestling as usual. What are your thoughts now? Second week in a row, they put Shane McMahon in charge. And how do you feel about that, especially pertaining to the stipulation at WrestleMania?
Uh, well, that with the stipulation in mind, very contradictory to the finish of WrestleMania. But I guess you could say it's going all right considering there's some new ideas being bounced around, and the lack of the authority being on TV is a noticeable difference. I like the idea of the tag team tournament.
The thing that I don't like about it just simply is that I don't understand why they went with the finishes that they did at WrestleMania. It just makes it look like the AJ Styles and the Undertaker finish at WrestleMania, where last second switches by McMahon, because the storylines coming out of them absolutely flying in the face of everything that happened at WrestleMania. And it's unfortunate because I think when you look at WrestleMania, Meltzer reported that 30,000 tickets were sold shortly after Shane and Undertaker was announced at Hell in a Cell, and that one of the reasons why Vince made that match was because tickets were not flying off the shelves for WrestleMania in Dallas. And I just feel like you could have left WrestleMania on a high, and people would have thought and looked at WrestleMania as starting anew with something new with Shane McMahon, and instead we got the clusterfuck that was Roman Reigns. Now, Joe at WWE.com is previewing in the Raw for this week that Shane McMahon may indeed be in charge again, and he's also being advertised as the honorary GM of SmackDown on the Tuesday taping. What are your takes on that this is continuing?
I just think it's kind of weird that they can't make up their minds where, it's going like week by week as opposed to, announcing him to be around long term, like say he's going to run Raw for the next 3 months, or even, 4 weeks or whatever it is. It seems like they're just flying by the seat of their pants week to week. And then now that's transferring onto SmackDown. And the thing with it too, with Shane being in charge, it doesn't feel like the promises that were coming out of what would have happened if Shane beat the Undertaker. I mean, I would have thought that Raw would have needed a complete refresh, like the even just the Titantron looking different, maybe the announce table is different, the ring skirt, just anything to shake things up, and it just feels like he's guest GM.
And also, when you factor in that now the Undertaker once again has been pulled from all advertising from this UK tour, it really is a head scratcher because they could have really sewed up the storyline really nice and easy. Undertaker is done, and Shane McMahon is taking over, and instead, whatever, Vince McMahon decided to make a swerve, and that brings us to our Raw review from last week. I thought that Raw was fabulous. I thought that it was, for a Monday Night Raw in this day and age, it was a great Raw. I thought that the opening segment with Shane McMahon that led into Kevin Owens, I thought was great. Um, what did you think about them using Kevin Owens with Shane McMahon in such a high-profile role, Joe?
Well, I'm gonna have to say that that's kind of shocking to have him be in that spot in the beginning of the show. Definitely, I think he deserves it because he's a great talker, and maybe they're just really seeing that they could have confidence in Kevin Owens to handle any situation.
And after that, during that segment, I should say, well, actually, right after that, when the New Day came out and they mentioned that Shane McMahon has started a number one contendership for the tag team titles. And of course, the question has to be asked, Joe, why is there a number one contendership for the tag team titles when the League of Nations just beat the New Day at WrestleMania in a non-title match? What do you think about that plot hole?
Well, that goes with the consistency or lack thereof of all the finishes from WrestleMania.
Yeah, I mean, it's now that WrestleMania is in the rear view, we obviously can now look back on it and fantasy book it a little bit more. And wow, I mean, what they put that crowd through when they could have done things a lot differently is just mind-boggling. But I think a tag team tournament, whatever, it's fine. There's nobody in that tournament that anybody wants to see. That's the interesting thing. And so it's like they're going to do it, and that's it. But most of the tag teams in there are not worth a damn. Enzo and Cass are in there. What are your thoughts of Enzo and Cass being in a tag team tournament and so far their 2-week debut on WWE television?
Them guys are awesome. The way they came out and just going balls out towards the Dudley Boys, just showing pure confidence, and then having the crowd behind him and when they premiered at the Raw after WrestleMania, it was just awesome to see the whole building, go along with their catchphrase. But then, you look when they were on SmackDown and, the following week, and you're not playing to such a smart audience, and, they come across as like, guys with a little interest, but, they're still not where they need to be amongst, the majority of the fans. But I like them guys a lot. I think they're great.
I listened to them on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast, and I thought that it was fabulous. It was the first time that I got to see them or hear them in any kind of interview, and I was very impressed with how big of fans, especially Enzo, were just growing up. And it was a very good podcast interview. I recommend to everybody to check that out. That was the Steve Austin Unleashed show with Enzo and Cass that just was posted last week. So having them in the tournament is fine. When you look at the tournament brackets, I try to envision, where it's going when really there's the only option that I see coming out of that tournament, because the New Day are baby faces, is the Dudley Boys. And I mean, is that really necessary? Or, because other than the Dudley Boys, I don't see anybody facing off against the New Day that would make any sense.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of thinking that the Dudleys need to get the titles, because if they were hired and they were brought back to help get the younger acts over, they definitely need to have the titles, and at least a good maybe month and a half reign, 2 months even, to prove that they're one of the greatest tag teams of all time. And then when the next team defeats them for the belts, it'll definitely mean more coming. That you defeated legends at their current age that were on a championship run.
Then on Raw, we had an absolutely fabulous WWE Women's Championship match between Natalya and Charlotte, with, of course, Ric Flair in her corner. This was the kind of match that I've been waiting from the women for a long time. I've been very critical when I have people over and we're watching pay-per-views or we're watching Raw, that I'm not a fan of traditional WWE women's wrestling. And it's just simply because as much as the men's wrestling looks fake sometimes, there's rarely anything that the women do that to me looks reasonable at all. A lot of it's just flailing their hair around, and their punches are really just not even close to connecting. And so I'm not a fan of women's wrestling in WWE, or at least how it's been portrayed over the last 10 years. But I got to say, this was the kind of match that I've wanted for women's wrestling. If you want to have women's wrestling be an equal draw on the card, in the mid cards where it belongs, then you need to have matches like this. I thought the chain wrestling in the beginning, the mat wrestling, was just outstanding. They told a great story. They actually got the crowd into the match by the end. The crowd was kind of lukewarm at the beginning, and by the end, the crowd was buying into the near finishes. They were buying into the submission holds, and I think that the WWE may want to think about maybe even putting the title on Natalia to put her up in that upper echelon, because if you have Charlotte, Sasha, and Becky, you have two faces and one heel. And obviously Sasha could go either way. Her character allows her to play either side. But to build that quality upper main events in the women's title, I would like to see them legitimatize Natalia with a title victory at Payback. Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, definitely, and she's clearly the right woman to do that, and it's cool that they're able to have a women's match where the focus is on wrestling and not, like you said, hair flailing and screaming and other goofy stuff, because uh, that's their second match in the last few weeks after Roadblock, which is also pretty highly regarded. So that's definitely. I don't know so much about putting the belt on her, because it seems like they want Charlotte to have a pretty decent reign, and maybe like I could see her dropping it at around SummerSlam, because that's not too long, to hold on to the title. But Natty's definitely a great program to really help her brush up on her skills in the ring.
Well, and I wouldn't normally say to hotshot the title like that, but you know, the way that they're setting it up is I would be shocked if Bret the Hitman Hart is not at Payback in Natalia's corner, because simply with Flair's interference at WrestleMania, with Flair's interference at Raw, I could totally see that as a natural storyline progression. And I mean, putting the title on Natalia with the help of Bret Hart, then you could justify taking it off of her a week or two later if Bret is not there and Flair, cheats again. So I could see storyline wise that would make okay sense, and it would help make Natalia a legitimate top four in that women's division with Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, and Charlotte. And I mean, let's face it, you can't have triple threat matches every week, Joe. I mean, you need more of that top level talent. And yes, they have other women in there, but Summer Rae is not going to have a wrestling match with Sasha Banks.
Right. Yeah. No, like you just said, those four women you just mentioned are definitely the high spots up on the main roster, and they you got to keep working combinations of those four if you're going to want to have any good matches. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of triple threats at all, and you got the dynamic of three faces and one heel out of those girls, so something needs to change.
And also the dynamic of, or not the dynamic, but the question needs to be asked: who did Paige piss off in the WWE? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, definitely miss seeing
Paige
her
has
on
been
TV.
a nothing for months and months and months, and for her to be put in the Divas tag title match at WrestleMania, I mean, that of all the women that were in that match, Natalya and Paige had no business being in that match. Their wrestling ability is far superior than the rest of the women in that match, and I thought that was really just a sign of there's something going on backstage with Paige, with the heat that Paige has as far as the WWE goes. And then also on Raw, we had the run-in debut of Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows, who Michael Cole referred to as Luke Gallows, his WWE name. And Joe, WWE.com has officially been referring to them as the Bullet Club. What are your take on that?
Well, that's WWE.com, but we'll see what they're called on TV. I just considering that they acknowledge another company's, intellectual property by that name, kind of weird. But I mean, even to the average, fan out there, like kids, women, and guys that aren't scouring the internet or familiar with New Japan. I mean, they're not even gonna, you could call them whatever you want, and they're not going to respond unless they do some research. But it's cool to see those guys finally debut. I'm not a fan of the Usos in any matter, so that doesn't interest me one bit, anything involving them guys. But Anderson and Gallows, I mean, that's a good team to throw against the Dudleys, but I could see them being heels for a while, though. They just got definitely the look and like the charisma of a heel tag team.
We also had AJ Styles versus Sami Zayn. And really what was, I mean, the WWE has had a nice run here in the last 2 months with great matches on Raw containing AJ Styles, Kevin Owens, or Sami Zayn being like the common denominator. Any combination of those three guys, they've put on stellar matches. And, of course, the question needs to be asked then, Joe, why are they blowing matches like this on Raw, even if they're not putting together 20-minute masterpieces? Why are they still making them meeting for the first time mean less on a pay-per-view if it's happened on Raw?
Yeah, that's a good one. Like for instance, with AJ's debuting in the company after the Royal Rumble, who they had him work with the first few matches was a good mix of the lower card guys, and then all of a sudden Jericho. If anything, like you said, you should be saving the first meeting of guys like that, where when you put them together, just going to put on a hell of a show. And AJ maybe could have just kept plowing through guys under him, maybe then get through maybe like a Ryback or somebody like that level, just a little step above the mid card. But they're definitely giving the shit away for free when you got on Raw, when you're having, like you said, any combination of those three guys is just almost guaranteed to be awesome.
Yeah, speaking of Ryback, we'll have more to say about him in our major news update here, because he said some things that I want to address this past week on the podcast. We had Apollo Crews wrestle Adam Rose in a completely dead match. The crowd just wanted nothing to do with it, and so there's nothing even really to talk about there. Then we had the main event, Bray Wyatt and Roman Reigns versus Sheamus and Alberto Del Rio. And, wow, there's not much more to say about the Roman Reigns not being over. I mean, obviously, it's been analyzed to death. I've written articles on ObsessedWrestling.com about it. We've talked about it on podcasts. We've talked about it in our personal lives together. There is just something that is never going to change. And when you see Bray Wyatt getting the babyface comebacks and the babyface pops from a crowd, and then the second Reigns does anything, it's just complete booze. The thing that strikes me about the Reigns situation is when you hear from people that are at the arenas, they say that it's different from Cena's heat, because Cena's heat was usually 60-40, 50-50, something like that. It was, let's go Cena, Cena sucks, or, but the people that are at the televised events lately are saying that it's 100% against Reigns, and that the WWE is tweaking the audio coming, over the air, over the broadcast. And man, there was nothing like it on this Monday night, where again you had Alberto Del Rio in LA. Joe was getting huge pops every time he punched Roman Reigns. And when you have a guy who's not over like Alberto Del Rio getting popped for defeating your face of the company, or doing damage to your face of the company, when are they going to stop beating their head against the wall and figure something out?
Yeah, I don't know. See, part of that too is I don't know if that's the crowd, doing. Are they just going along with the flow because it's the cool thing to boo the guy, or is that like really how everybody in attendance feels? Because at some point too, it starts to be like, well, maybe this guy, he's just getting it to get it because the fans are so bored at that point. But then, of course, obviously, I know there's way more audience that just not a fan of the guy to begin with. But yeah, like if Del Rio, I don't care who it was on the roster, if they were in a ring with him, the crowd's probably they're gonna, go with any opponent of Reigns. But I don't know that the four of them guys in that main event, that's a rough patch of characters that they need like a lot of retooling.
So that was Raw, and I got to tell you, for a Raw modern day, there was very few segments that I fast forwarded through. I generally watch on DVR at least an hour or two after it starts, so that way I could fly through the commercials and all the nonsense segments. And that was a pretty solid Raw, especially for a 3-hour Raw. I did not really have problems with most things. I didn't find myself blowing through segments on the triple arrow, the triple forward arrow. It was fine. It was a fine, solid Raw, and it was probably the Raw that should have been the week before, coming out of WrestleMania. And now we're 2 weeks away from Payback, Joe, going into Raw tomorrow. Any guess or any feeling of where they're going with the Bullet Club, AJ Styles, Roman Reigns, and is there going to be any crossover there? Are we looking at AJ Styles and the Bullet Club together, or as some have speculated, is the Bullet Club going to line himself with Reigns and create the Roman Empire stable?
Yeah, I kind of actually, all right. Now I do like the idea of reuniting the Bullet Club guys together. If you're going to put Roman Reigns and the Usos as a unit, I don't know anything that's going to make me want to vomit more personally. But the idea of it will be pretty cool, and I think not only will it'll be completely solidified that Reigns is never going to be over to the fans, but that's just going to kill off the Usos completely to the few people that enjoy watching them.
We had some pretty much minor weekend news. I wouldn't say that anything was pretty wild. Obviously, we had the passing of Blackjack Mulligan last week. Joel, we're about the same age. I don't have much of a memory of Blackjack Mulligan. He was already inactive for the most part by the time that I was able to remember anything in wrestling. But obviously the stories that he was a real tough guy, a legitimate tough guy, which back then when you wrestled, when you were in this business, you had to be a legitimate tough guy. But do you have any memories at all of Blackjack Mulligan?
Definitely not from in the ring, because that his era is before my time, and I never really went back and watched any of the stuff he was in, especially WCW, where I'm not familiar with the late 80s and early 90s stuff when he retired. I would have to say my only memory of Blackjack Mulligan was I used to collect the WCW 1990 edition trading cards. I received a box of them for Christmas, not even know what WCW was, and I I remember getting many, many doubles of blackjack. Tons of respect to anybody though that ever wrestled to begin with, let alone from that era of badasses. And he sure as hell spawned a talented family.
He did. He did definitely with Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt as his grandsons. Um,
And also
other,
his sons, Kendall and Barry Windham.
well, that's true too. That's correct. Which did you know that Bray's first name is Wyndham? His real first name is Wyndham.
No, no, I actually never looked up what his real name was.
Yeah, Wyndham Rotundo, I believe, is his name. Um, but so in other news we had just came down a day or two ago. WWE has suspended Adam Rose and Connor for 60 days for second violations of the wellness policy. This will be the end of social outcasts. I fully expect all four members to be released because of this now. Just simply because, well, actually, let me take that back. I think they have bigger plans for Bo Dallas, but for Heath Slater and uh, and Curtis Axel and Adam Rose, I think this is going to be a devastating blow to anything the social outcasts have because Rose is going to be gone in 60 days. And you just brought up all this new talent. Somebody's got to go. Somebody has to go. They can't keep everybody on this roster. This roster is getting bloated with fat right now, and they need to carve some of that up. Do you think social outcasts survive Adam Rose's suspension?
Well, Heath Slater survived the last wave of cuts when the other three-man band guys got their papers, but right now is definitely not a time to be doing anything stupid to jeopardize your job with the signing of all these guys that are way over to the hardcore audience to begin with, and then now they're coming in looking for spots, and then all the NXT call-ups. You got to be pretty dumb. I don't know what violation they were for, if it was for performance enhancement or for narcotics or whatever it was, but not a smart move. Clearly don't appreciate your job, and considering it's not even a guarantee that you're going to remain there, but now you just gave them one more reason to let your ass go.
Now, on the topic of the wellness policy, Joe, how do you feel about the wellness policy in general?
That's a tough one, considering that I'm not involved in that kind of a career, but I guess I could say it's a good thing for the sake that uh, it makes guys look better that are just drug free to be role models, because there's a lot of kids that look up to them, and even whatever, there's people in general that look up to these guys. And when it comes down to steroids and all the growth hormone stuff, you definitely don't want to view guys as cheaters or dirty. But then again, they live a rough life, and some, I guess that stuff would help your body in other ways when they say it helps with the recovery process and everything. But as a whole, I think it's just better to have a drug-free environment no matter where you work, and that maybe will help not have guys get in the ring under the influence to just further ensure the safety of both guys or any of the guys involved in the ring.
Personally, I don't even like the concept of the WWE having a wellness policy, but it's for a completely different reason. WWE loves to get around all these legal requirements of taking care of the wrestlers because they claim they're contractors and they're not employees. And for them to have this wellness policy that has guidelines that are not negotiated by a collective bargaining agreement like in professional sports leagues, I think that it's a crock. I think that it's not fair to these guys because they have no say in the terms of the wellness policy. They have no say into what's contained in the wellness policy. They don't have any say in the discipline of the wellness policy. And so therefore, I'm completely against the entire wellness policy because you have guys like Triple H and Ryback still on your roster, so you can't even tell me that this wellness policy is all-encompassing.
Yeah, no, yeah, with one look at their bodies and you got to wonder what did they call in sick the day of those tests?
Yeah, I mean, but to me, the bigger issue really is the fact that this wellness policy is unilaterally implemented by the company, and I don't understand how legally they're allowed to get away with that when these guys are independent contractors according to IRS guidelines, and for them to have to follow a lifestyle policy, to me, when you're not an employee, I vehemently against the wellness policy completely. And the same in UFC. I don't believe that we should have any say in what these guys do with their body. Their body is their livelihood. Their body is their money maker. And so therefore I am not going to tell somebody you can't do something if it's going to put more money in your pocket or if it's going to extend your career another 10 years. To me, I mean, is it sad if a guy does something that, is going to cause them to die early? Of course, it's sad, but the wellness policy to me is not the answer because I don't think that it's fair to the participants and to the wrestlers because they don't have any say in the matter. If there was a union and it was collectively bargained, like in baseball, football, basketball, and hockey, I would be totally fine with it. But since they have no say in it, I'm completely against it. I don't know. Does that make any sense, Joe? Do you see where I'm coming from?
No, absolutely. And you know what? I wasn't even close to your way of thinking with it because I actually I agree now that you convinced me. Considering that the company doesn't want to give the guys a pension or provide health insurance, yet right away they want them to abide by their wellness policy. It's like, what the hell? If they're not employees, then I guess they shouldn't have to follow certain guidelines. Like, the people on staff, the writers and everybody else of guys to get paid vacations and, all the benefits of having a normal 9-to-5 job. I think the wrestlers are just always going to get screwed.
Yeah, I would just like to see them have some representation, at least with the wellness policy, because, I mean, yeah, I'm sure they're given a notification of what's on there, but who formulates that list? Who formulates what is a violation? And, whereas like in our company that we work for, if we were to get randomly drug tested or what have you, it is overseen, the process is overseen by the union, and we have a grievance process that we could go through to make sure that it was all done on the up and up. I don't know the safeties that are involved in a WWE wellness policy that allows wrestlers to have the confidence that they were treated right. So to me, the wellness policy was just reactionary. It was with all the deaths in the early 2000s, and every time I see every WrestleMania, I see Triple H come out there, I think to myself, well, they must not have to test executives.
I'm sure about that.
Well, and it's funny because actually I think that's one of the reasons why Billy Gunn got pinched because he failed that bodybuilding test, because the employees, people who are employees of the WWE, legally cannot be tested like they test the wrestlers. So Billy Gunn, being on the gas as a trainer, he wasn't under WWE wellness testing. That's why he wasn't getting caught. He got caught when he did that bodybuilding competition. So even that has a bad look, because it's like you're treating these people with, that they have to abide by all these things, but then your own employees don't have to abide by the same thing.
Yeah, no, that's just goofy, and I don't know why they had to make an example out of that guy in the first place. And I wonder if there was more to this story of getting rid of Billy Gunn, because that guy, I mean, all the falling out that they had, and I remember seeing the shoot interviews the Outlaws did, all the smack they talked about Triple H, and then they come back and they're all, lovey-dovey for years, and they were working programs in the last 2 years with guys, and all of a sudden, like, Billy Gunn is, persona non grata. I don't know. Seems like
We
a
also,
martyr.
yeah. Again, I had mentioned it during the Raw recap about the Undertaker being pulled from UK tour again. Do you think, Joe, that we've seen the last of the Undertaker?
Well, first off, I sure as hell hope not. Absolutely one of my top two favorites from the very, very beginning of his debut Survivor Series. The guy, man, whatever. I think that guy's done enough, gave us enough, hopefully done enough for himself where he's set for the rest of his life. I'm sure, but if his body's done and he can't, do it as the best he can. I know the last few matches he's had were not the greatest, but we're always willing to give the Undertaker a pass just because it's a damn treat to see him still going, especially those of us that grew up in the early 90s as wrestling fans. But whatever happens with him, I support his decision. I just hope he's not done for at least one more match with a good build-up, a good storyline, and something should come out of it. By the WWE losing such an important character and talent like The Undertaker, somebody else needs to be made in his passing.
I have a feeling that we have seen the last of the Undertaker, and that's simply because Mark Calloway is not a glory hound. I do not anticipate Mark Calloway feeling comfortable going through a retirement buildup like a Shawn Michaels or like a Ric Flair. I don't think that that's what he's looking for, and I think that one of the reasons why they pulled that swerve at WrestleMania was because he didn't want to. He's just not that kind of guy to go out with the applause. I mean, you never hear interviews from him. You rarely see him on DVDs out of character. I mean, he's a very different cat when it comes to that kind of stuff, and I just feel that I think that he may be gone, and if he does come back, it's going to be like it was a few years ago. It will be one-offs, and that's it. He's not going to do any kind of prolonged storyline. And I got to tell you, I went back and I was watching WrestleMania yesterday a little bit. Undertaker looked like shit physically at WrestleMania, I thought. I think growing out the hair with the skullet looks fucking horrendous on him, and that he should keep it shaved or something. But
yeah, like when he lost against Brock, definitely the hair's got to go.
The hair is awful. He's really looking old in the face, and for a guy who's only 52, I believe, or 51, he's
only 50. Yeah,
right? Or even he's only 50. I mean, he really looks fucking old, and so he wasn't moving very well. Obviously, the entrance at WrestleMania 32 was still just amazing, and you'll always have that at every WrestleMania. But I just don't see any reason for him to hang around, especially if he doesn't want to. But so as of right now, he has no future dates with the company.
And you know what? I was just going to throw in too. You are absolutely right about the Undertaker not being a glory hound, because I just find it hard right now to even picture the Undertaker going into the Hall of Fame and having an acceptance speech. He always seemed kind of private and real like stoic about everything regarding the guys, and he's just always somebody that was more giving because he knew he was a made man, and he was always loyal to Vince and had a great spot. But the Undertaker just seems like one of them guys. He could just disappear, and that does no damage to his career or his character especially. I think it's more for his character he's trying to protect. The Undertaker's not going to sit there and get roses thrown at him,
And we also had this week, we had a guy opening his mouth and having words come out of it that I just want to say, I don't ever want to see him on TV again. That, of course, is the Ryback. I mean, really, Joe, I don't know if you're aware, but he apparently on a podcast made some comments about how he was disappointed with him and his and Callisto's spot on the WrestleMania 32 card, and that he feels that he should still be being pushed at a world title level. I mean, I get it. A guy wants to have, a confidence in himself, and in this business, confidence is a big part of it. But really, Joe, Ryback is out there putting this out there.
Yeah, I don't want to talk crap. That's not my thing. But given his situation, I think he's another guy that falls in the category of be careful what you wish for, because you might not even have that prelim WrestleMania match next year. Because there's a ton of guys that are ready to replace him, and I'm sorry, he's nothing special. I mean, it'd be one thing if like, damn, this guy's awesome. What the hell are they doing? Blah blah blah. But he's just Ryback.
Right, and I mean, obviously, this isn't 2012 or whenever it
Right.
was that he
Yeah,
came
that
up.
little hot streak he had. Yeah, but still, main event, like you said. Are you kidding me?
I mean, yeah, like you said, this guy is lucky that he even had a singles match at WrestleMania.
Yeah, and
And
if they weren't throwing everybody on the card just for the sake of it, then you probably wouldn't have seen him.
and I wonder if this had anything to do with the fact that he may have voiced his displeasure prior to WrestleMania, because if you remember, Dave Meltzer had reported that the production meeting or something on the Thursday before WrestleMania, when the whole company got to Dallas, they had a meeting with all the talent and said that they considered the whole 6 hours of programming to be all WrestleMania, whether it was the kickoff show or the pre-show. And
Agreed.
you wonder if they were trying to head off maybe comments like this, but I just found it amazing because this guy has his talent quality is not high enough for him to be demanding a better place on the card, nor is his popularity. I mean, if Ryback disappeared tomorrow, there's not a fan that would stop watching. There's not a fan that would be in 6 months, oh, they just need to bring back Ryback, or I can't wait till they bring back Ryback. Like, it's Ryback. Here's a
Right.
guy who took the Intercontinental title from Daniel Bryan last year in the tournament, and by the time he was done with it, the title meant nothing. You know,
Hmm.
and thankfully Kevin Owens and Dean Ambrose were able to elevate it again, and well, now of course it's in the situation it's at right now. But here's a guy who has not done anything in the last 3+ years to put any heat on himself or shine himself up at all, and it's just amazing because I look at it this way: you hear about like when AJ Styles was coming in that he actually was making more money in Japan, but he wanted the less dates or whatever to come to WWE or whatever the case was. If Ryback's so unhappy, he should be able to see with his own eyes right now. He's never seeing the main events again. Leave the company again. Go somewhere else. You could make substantial amounts of money in touring, doing indie shows, doing other promotions, going to Japan. But if he's so unhappy, why does he just leave then?
I was just going to say that you brought up exactly what I was thinking. If you're so, adamant about about how you feel and your position in the company, the best way to truly voice your frustration is to do what CM Punk did. Maybe not in the same way, but move on with your life. Or like other guys, like you heard of Wade Barrett. He publicly said that he's not going to renew his contract when it ends. I mean, there's other places to go, and you never know what good could come out of that. But definitely not going to be in the main event picture. Not that I could possibly foresee, or I don't think anybody else for that matter. But yeah, I don't know, that I kind of done on Ryback.
There's been a lot of speculation on many podcasts with all these call-ups. Like I mentioned earlier, you have a very bloated, fatty roster right now, and there's a lot of people. Bret Hart mentioned it on his podcast that it's usually shortly after spring, after the UK tour, or the European tour, I should say, that when they come back home, there's pink slips waiting for guys. Joe, do you imagine some cuts to this bloated roster, and do you have any idea on who you think might be the ones seeing the door?
First thing I want to say is that I would rather see guys get moved around, and I'm talking about moved maybe from the main roster down to NXT for like maybe a 4 or 5 week session of refreshing, and also to freshen up the matches down there, because there's a lot of NXT matches where they bring in local indie talent or traveling indie talent as kind of like job guys. Well, how about putting some of the main roster guys down there to maybe work on their stuff a little more? They'll still be on TV, and then you don't have to cut them right away. On the other hand, that this really doesn't. It's not like the Attitude Era and the era before that, where I thought the mid card was awesome, just for the sake of characters, and to have like to look at it as like a supporting cast to the stars or the main event. Every TV show, every movie needs its supporting actors and supporting cast, but these guys all seem like they're always fighting and clawing to get to the top, when we all know that no matter what, if it's what movie stars or athletes, wrestlers, there's only certain, a few spots to get to the very top. So I could name probably 10 guys off the top of my head that will get cut. We already mentioned the social outcast guys for sure. Then I mean, I don't. There's just then like the little. What about the other guys on payroll like Hornswoggle? Like I remember he failed the wellness policy about 4 or 5 months ago, so they're paying this guy to do nothing.
Right.
Okay, so there's 80 grand out the window, or 100 grand, whatever he makes. So I don't know. I don't know their finances, but I wouldn't be shocked if they lose like 4 or 5 guys in the next month.
Let me look up here. I'm going to go to Wikipedia, and I'm going to see if I could um, pull up what the roster is, and hopefully it's relatively, um, accurate.
Oh, Darren Young, that was another guy I was going to mention.
So
Feel sorry for that guy.
here are the ones that have been updated on Wikipedia that are main roster talents. And I'm going to give you some of the ones that I think are possibilities, and you could give me a yes or a no. Okay?
Mm,
Adam Rose.
gone.
All right. Alex Riley.
Stay.
Um, let's see.
Because I think he's one of them guys that NXT could utilize, and they have utilized.
Damian Sandow.
I hate to see him go, but I would think he's expendable.
I think that he may want to go. I think it could benefit his career to go.
Yes, agreed.
Darren Young, I say go.
Yeah, Titus O'Neil's not going to ever recover from what he did. So what else are they going to do with the poor guy?
What about Dolph Ziggler?
I wonder. I remember hearing a few months ago, reading online, that there was another pretty big name talent that said that they didn't want to re-sign when their time came around, and I just have a feeling it's that guy, because he's at the he's really popular with the hardcore crowd, and he's a great wrestler, and there's enough people behind him to support him if he were to leave. So I would say a big maybe.
See, I think he would be like Sandow, another guy that could benefit from going maybe over to Japan. Just, it's almost like the glass ceiling. Like, I feel like Ziggler has hit the glass ceiling. And
Yes.
unless he's just completely happy with where his money is, which could very well be the case, that's his business, that's fine. But maybe a change could be beneficial for his career. El Torito.
Yeah, file him along with Hornswoggle.
Fandango.
I forgot about him. Yeah, I'd say he's expendable.
What about Goldust?
I'm definitely going to be biased on this because he's one of my all-time favorite, but I think just because of the lineage, I don't think they'll ever fire the guy for being, Dusty's son and Cody's brother. But I think he's way too valuable.
I think that he's valuable simply because he's one of the few comedic relief characters.
Yeah, definitely natural at it. And I
Yeah.
don't know so much about R-Truth, but the stuff Goldust and Booker T's done and all the serious Mind Games Goldust stuff, I mean, that was comedic relief in a different way.
All right. Heath Slater.
Uh, yeah, 50-50.
We already said Hornswoggle. Jack Swagger.
Uh, yeah, definitely could see him going.
It's amazing that he was an NCAA, I believe, champion wrestler because I don't see it when he fucking wrestles. I never have. Have you?
No, no, I've never really seen anything. It can't really, I'm not. He seems like a good guy, but yeah, never really saw any brightness in the ring.
King Barrett, we know, is gone.
That's a waste.
Connor from the Ascension, obviously, he's suspended right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why even suspend a guy like that? Why not just cut him? What are you going to do with the guy? Are you afraid that TNA is going to pick him up and they're gonna put the company on his shoulders and he's gonna rise them to new heights? I would have
Yeah.
just cut him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see who else. Who else would be on the fence? We have R-Truth.
I think he'll stay around because
He survived this long. I'm
right.
sure he's not being overpaid, so I think that's why he survived. So therefore, I think he
They
stays.
need veterans around too. I mean, the guy's been around, I think, since 2001.
Yeah. Of course, the Ryback.
Yeah, I don't see him getting rid of him, but yeah, you never know.
Stardust.
Definitely staying. Probably ditching that gimmick at some point.
Tyler Breeze.
I think he better start applying to other companies.
Now, here's an interesting one, but I think he's going to stay, and that's Tyson Kidd. Generally, the WWE, when somebody suffers a debilitating injury like that in the past, especially have to do with the spinal cord, WWE keeps them on the roster pretty much indefinitely. Like I believe Darren Drozdoff, if he's not still getting paid by the WWE, he was getting paid for many, many, many years afterwards as almost like, just a disability like salary, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think they should do something like that when somebody sacrifices and with that kind of an injury. Yes, I think that's a good thing.
And then we have Zack Ryder. Does he make the cut?
I wouldn't say no. I think that they could do what they did with him at WrestleMania and just bring him out, and he could be like the Zack Ryder guy, and people just like him enough. But then you could also say the same about Sandow. So I guess he's 50-50.
The problem with Ryder is that he hasn't been seen since he lost his rematch to The Miz on SmackDown. They did,
right. Yeah, like what is that? Yeah.
I mean, he was on TV for 3 days in a row, WrestleMania, Raw, and the SmackDown taping on Tuesday, and he hasn't been around now. It's been almost 2 weeks with no sight of him. Some of the female wrestlers, we'll just go through these real quick. Alicia Fox.
I could see her leaving.
Cameron.
Isn't she the one that's married to the Uso? Or is that Alicia Fox? Whichever one's married to the Uso.
That's Naomi.
Oh, Naomi. Okay. All right. So Cameron, I could see her leaving.
Naomi, we said stay.
Rosa Mendez.
Rosa Mendez, yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Summer Rae and Tamina.
Tamina probably get rid of because of her father, and then I think she's well over 35.
The thing about
Um,
Tamina is I wish they would book her right because I'm
mhm.
on board with Brian Alvarez of Wrestling Observer because when Aja Kong got cut from TNA about a month or two ago, um, he made a great point that it wouldn't be a bad idea for the WWE to bring in her in this division because the one thing that the female division is missing is a brute force woman, like somebody that is a real obstacle for these Barbie dolls. Because let's face it, Charlotte, Sasha, Becky, whatever you want to say, any of them, they're still in the form of a Barbie doll. Now they're very athletic, but I mean, you
Yeah, they're
know,
still beautiful. They're slender.
yeah,
Yes.
they're not, doughy, you know. And
Hmm.
but Tamina is taller than them and she's thicker than them. And if they would have made her instead of a diva, made her a brute, where she pounds the living crap out of them, and her moves are all power moves. Even if she's very green and inexperienced, you would only have to teach her power moves. You would teach her Braun Strowman moves. You know, so I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I think keeping her around would not be an awful thing, but
Well, are you familiar with Nia Jax and NXT?
I know the name, but I'm not familiar with her now.
That's pretty much everything you just said. Tamina should be is what Nia Jax was doing a few months ago, probably around December, January. She's a large Samoan woman, much bigger, thicker, much thicker actually than Tamina, and I had the opportunity to see her wrestle live in a semi-main event against Bailey when NXT was in Chicago, and it was a good match. I love Bailey. She's one of my, I'd say, top five people in the whole company to watch. But we all know Bailey's. She looks like a 12-year-old girl and looks like she weighs 80 pounds, and she was able to hit that large Samoan girl with her finisher, the Bailey to belly. So when you got somebody playing the monster role and could still get belly to belly by somebody three times smaller than her, it's is what it is.
Yeah, I miss the days of Bull Nakano and Alundra Blaze,
Yeah. Oh, oh goodness.
which that SummerSlam '94 match, I'm telling you, that might pop up this week in the Diamond in the Rough match of the week. So I don't know, we'll see. Um, but one of the things I would also like to see them change about the women is now we've ditched the divas. I would like to see the women in a little bit more traditional female ring gear. I mean, not everything has to be bedazzled, like a friggin' 6-year old would do. You know,
Hmm.
there's no reason why they can't wear, um, just more traditional Alundra Blaze, Medusa type outfits. They don't have to be showing. I mean, because in reality, right? I, what does Ronda Rousey fight in, right? They have the girls, they wear like sports bras, right? And then either like
Hmm.
boxing shorts or like sports shorts, right? I believe like Ronda Rousey's not fighting
Hmm.
with her cleavage out, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So maybe it's time to also change up a little bit and how they allow the women to dress in the ring. Also, I don't know. Do you have any feelings about that either way?
Well, the only thing I could really say, yeah, I agree. And then my backing for it is my favorite female wrestler in the world, Bailey. Look at her attire. She has like the cool Ultimate Warrior rockers type fringes to the outfit, but she does wrestle in a sports bra type top and pants.
No, so we had quite the big news earlier in the week. Bray Wyatt was injured in a match in the UK, I believe on Tuesday, the first show over there. I believe it's in Ireland. And apparently it was a freakish, almost like Luke Harper type injury where There was really no move involved. He was just walking back from the corner, and something went bad. And to me, we've had no official diagnosis, but to me, when something just pops like that and they say calf, I'm thinking it's more Achilles. And if it is, you're looking at possibly 12 months, which could be devastating for the Wyatt family, Joe.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was a little bit of jumping the gun, but I was going to put this under the worst thing to happen in wrestling this week for me, just for the sake of it. Sucks for anybody to be injured, but I always liked Bray Wyatt, and I was hoping that they were on to really fixing the character and making more out of him and utilizing him to his potential. And then, of course, something like this got to happen. Hope he recovers well.
And speaking of the worst thing of the week, we could open the show up and do more open format stuff, and we could start by doing the worst thing in wrestling this week. And for me, it was already talked about, but the Ryback comments about not being happy at WrestleMania 32, like I said, just I don't want to hear it from a guy like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your worst thing? Are you going with what you just said?
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Yeah, another injury, but this is to somebody that was not in the already made position like Cena, Rollins, Orton. This is a guy that was almost there, and probably this was going to be a launching pad because when you got those guys I just mentioned all coming back, they're going to need each one of them are going to need a program. So if they were about to, really heat up Bray Wyatt, even if it was to be a baby face, Randy Orton's always a good heel. If he came back, worked heel with them. So yeah, just the loss of the next 6 to 8 month potential of Bray Wyatt.
And Bray Wyatt lately has also been suffering from some back injuries. I believe last year's WrestleMania he worked with a very injured ankle. The injuries are piling up for Bray Wyatt, and I'm not to say that any of them have been major until now, but he's often banged up, and obviously at his size and the style that he wrestles, it actually makes me wonder how amazing it is that Kevin Owens at his size and the way he wrestles isn't banged up more. But kind of reminds me a little bit of like Ahmed Johnson. Like Ahmed Johnson, they wanted to push him, and every time they were ready to push him, he would suffer a setback, an injury. And for the 2 years that he was in the company, it was constant stop, start, stop, start. And I wonder just possibly if maybe that is a little bit of what causes the WWE to hesitate from going all in on Bray Wyatt as much as I feel like they should. But, I mean, Payback is coming up this month, May 1st, from the Allstate Arena in Chicago. I was there, Payback, June 1st, 2014, and I remember bringing my buddy who hadn't watched wrestling in years and telling him that this Bray Wyatt entrance is going to be awesome. And he was like, yeah, it's awesome. Who is this guy? What's he about? And I'm like, this guy's the future. This guy's going to be the next big thing. And 2 years later, it's like we're still spinning our wheels as Bray Wyatt fans.
Yes, unfortunately, the big two matches and programs that I think he should have benefited from would have been the match against Undertaker at WrestleMania, and I believe after that in SummerSlam against John Cena.
Well, it was at the Payback that I was at in 2014, where Cena beat him in the Last Man Standing match, and I was very disappointed. And that was at a time before I had enough respect for Cena, where I thought that Cena was just burying the guy. But now, obviously, I've come to realize that it's not Cena. Cena's the last guy to bury anybody. It's not his doing. But one of the things I would like to see with the Wyatt family, and it obviously all depends on this Bray Wyatt situation and exactly how severe it is, but we talk about the social outcasts, and we talk about a couple of the guys getting released. I don't anticipate Bo Dallas getting released, but what would you think about the Wyatt family abducting, or whatever you want to call it, brainwashing Bo Dallas, just like they did with like Daniel Bryan around Royal Rumble 2014, where it's like it'd be a way to bring him into the Wyatt family without having to just randomly acknowledge that the two actors are brothers, but they could just kind of like a cult brainwash him into the family. What would you think about that?
Oh, I think that would be great, and I don't think they should acknowledge them being brothers because it should be treated, or not should, but it can be treated as it's all fiction, which it is anyway. So don't even have to go there. But I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with that. I even this would be a stretch, but it's been done before with like one of my all-time favorites, Goldust. Could you imagine them abducting him and then him being reintroduced as Sister Abigail? Not really joking around though. I'm just saying like a really a brainwashed character and definitely a mind fuck, and you bring this guy back just to, like the way Goldust portrayed the androgynous character in the '90s. I don't know, just an idea.
No,
But I like Bo Dallas.
it is an idea. I think as crazy as this sounds, I think with the Wyatt family, they tend to shy away from the stickiness with them because their character has to be very dark and real, almost like how for decades the Undertaker was never involved in the stickiness, like he wasn't involved in the comedic like shit. You know what I mean? Like the Undertaker was always kept on an island where his storylines, even though they may have been ridiculous, they weren't sticky. They weren't, childish, so to speak, or something like that, or done
Agreed.
for comedic relief.
Yeah, and his vignettes, the funeral parlor stuff, the building of the caskets. Yeah, none of that was. I wouldn't call that. It was sticky to the character, but it was not like they weren't doing it and as a joke. It was all serious, as serious as it could be for the early '90s.
Definitely. Do you have a diamond in the rough match for this week?
Yeah, you know what? I was doing a lot of thinking of my all-time favorite. One of my all-time favorite pay-per-views was SummerSlam 1991. I mentioned this to you before, and that was the tape. Like we all had the tape where we would watch it over and over and over, and that was definitely the one. It's my brother and I had common interest on, and I would always. Everybody talks about the main event, and then my favorite match on the card was Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect. But then I was just thinking about the other matches on the card, and one of the other ones I liked on there, and it was for the tag straps, was LOD and the Nasty Boys, and that was LOD's the first time they won the tag straps was at that pay-per-view, and that made them the first tag team to hold the AWA, NWA, and WWF straps, and I think that was pretty significant. And with that, the Nasty Boys and LOD were not the smoothest workers, but man, LOD fun to just beat up on anybody to watch.
Yeah, the LOD's run in the WWF, the first run, like I'm very mixed because I want to say it was just garbage, but I also know that that's unpopular, and I don't want to disrespect them, but when you look at it, they came in shortly before SummerSlam 1990. They didn't wrestle on the card. They made the appearance helping the Hart Foundation defeat Demolition in the 2 out of 3 falls. And after that, they had a WrestleMania 7 squash match against Power and Glory. And I think they had previously they did appear at Survivor Series 1990. I believe, I'm doing this off the top of memory. I believe it was it Ultimate Warrior and the Legion of Doom and the Texas Tornado versus Mr. Perfect and Demolition, I believe, was the match. And I'm trying to remember. Did they have a match at Royal Rumble 1991? I'm just
Hmm.
trying to do this off the
I don't know
bat.
who do they even have wrestled it. Yeah, like a heel. Who would have been the heel tag team at that time? Yeah, Power and Glory,
Were the
Nasty
Beverly Brothers
Boys.
around by then?
Mm,
I don't remember.
in '91, yeah.
But their career in WWF was very. It was a lot of. There's just not much there, you know. Then they wrestled, like you said, at SummerSlam 1991. Um, but their career was always. It was more of a what could have been kind of thing because especially with the tag teams that were there. I mean, we never got to see a high profile match between LOD and the Hart Foundation.
Or the Rockers. Yeah, correct.
Right, or the Rockers. Um, so it's it's disappointing. I'm looking right now. I'm trying to see if they wrestled at Royal Rumble 91 because actually now I'm curious because I want to say that they did, but I can't remember who. I want to remember. I want to think it was another squash match. Let's see.
And
No, they.
that's what we loved about the Road Warriors LOD is most of the matches were squash matches, and the ones that weren't were they felt like squash matches because they were sure pounding the hell out of their opponents. So so awesome to watch those old AWA matches with the Road Warriors. You
Here's
gotta feel
one.
sorry for everyone in the ring with them.
Here's one that I forgot. Royal Rumble 1991. Ted DiBiase and Virgil defeated Dusty Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes. And
Oh, okay.
what I find interesting about that is you had Dusty Rhodes still on your company 2 months before WrestleMania. Like, why would you have gotten rid of some people before WrestleMania instead of keeping them around?
Yeah. Oh man, you could really go back and analyze. It's everybody talks about nowadays. Well, the past, it had, sure had its flaws.
Definitely. But boy, when you look back at these cards, boy, does it bring back memories. Hulk Hogan winning the Royal Rumble, last eliminating Earthquake. Remember how huge the feud was between Hulk Hogan and Earthquake?
Um, yeah, when it comes to Hogan feuds, like when if you think about Hogan, even in the late '80s, what I liked most about it, and then looking back on it, is he feuded with so many different people. There was so much variety. It was never, obviously there was him, Hogan and Savage, Hogan and Warrior, where they had multiple rematches, but exactly going against Hercules Hernandez and Earthquake and just plowing through everybody. Almost every before WrestleMania 4, like King Kong Bundy in WrestleMania 3, or not WrestleMania 3. I'm sorry, WrestleMania 2, right? King Kong Bundy.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I just Hogan working with them kind of guys is awesome, and yeah, Earthquake in particular, like you mentioned, freaking great, hell of a heel, and just big fan.
Well, I mean, you go back to WrestleMania 6, and WWE was already building up Earthquake to be this larger than life challenger for Hogan,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so simple. It was just this large fat guy that would just sit on your chest.
Right,
You
right.
know, I mean, the it was like you didn't even have to tell the story because the image was everything. And it was like, how is Hulk Hogan going to keep this guy from sitting on his chest? And if you remember, prior to WrestleMania 6, they even used the Ultimate Challenge of the Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan to get Earthquake over because in back-to-back episodes of Superstars, they had Earthquake squash the Undertaker or squash the Ultimate Warrior, and Hogan came for the save. And then the following week, they had Earthquake squash Hulk Hogan, and then Ultimate Warrior come for the save. So they even used that massive main event for WrestleMania to put Earthquake over for a future feud. And going into that SummerSlam 1990 feud, that match, that was I remember just like this guy, you can't get near him because he's so mean and evil and nasty. And oh, I can only imagine what it's like to have your chest sat on by a guy who's 400 pounds.
Yeah, yeah. Between Earthquake, Yoko, Vader with the Vader bomb, it's some rough
Do
stuff.
you have any memories of SummerSlam 1990?
Um, what was the main event of that card?
Well, it was the double main event. It was Earthquake and Hulk Hogan, and then the last match of the night was Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude in a cage.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah, that match in particular. Oh yeah.
And that was, I believe, Rick Rude's last appearance in the WWE, because memory serves me, he was advertised for Survivor Series, but left shortly before, if I remember. Yeah, I believe so.
So
And
really, 90 was his last year there.
I'm almost positive, because Survivor Series 90 ended up being Warrior, Legion of Doom, and Texas Tornado versus Mr. Perfect and Demolition, and which meant that Warrior was not facing he was not feuding with anybody going into the match. So I think that Rude was gone right after SummerSlam, but I mean, that match was decent, actually. I mean, he got a decent match out of the Ultimate Warrior. It wasn't great, but I remember Warrior, I think, somebody was on the top rope. No, at the top of the cage. Was it
Wasn't
Rude?
it an axe handle?
Yeah. Maybe it was Warrior. Somebody did an axe handle from the top of the cage.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think it was Rude to Warrior. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously Rude had the athletic ability to do it. It's one of those moments that are never talked about. But if you went back and you watched it on the WWE Network for $9.99, if you went back and watched it, you'd be like, "Wow, why isn't that clip played over and over and over again?" It's probably just because Rick Rude was always, I wouldn't say persona non grata, but WWE has never propped up Rick Rude to the level that he probably should be at. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember reading about Rick Rude being really upset that he was never put in the main event picture in both WWF and WCW. And I don't think it was so much of an ego thing. I like most people, I thought he was awesome. He was one of them guys for his time. Like, maybe not too ahead of his time, but definitely overlooked.
And the problem with guys like Rick Rude and, like I mentioned, Legion Doom of that era is, and even Mr. Perfect to a lesser extent, because as much as you and I love Mr. Perfect, excuse me, because of the era that he wrestled in and also because of his injuries, there's actually not a lot of documentation as far as pay-per-view wise of Mr. Perfect or of Rick Rude. You don't have a lot of matches. I mean, you have with Perfect, you have obviously his match against Bret Hart, and you have his rematch with Bret Hart in King of the Ring 93, and you also have his match against Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 93, but that's pretty much it. There's not a lot there. He does have other matches that are not really notable. There was a retirement match with Ric Flair on Monday Night Raw. Did you ever go back on the network and watch that?
Let me see. I'm sure I've seen it, not recently.
It was, I believe, it was the Raw after Royal Rumble 93, so it would have been like the second or third Raw ever.
Oh, okay, yeah, yes. Then I did. I watched those in order when they put them on the network about a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a loser leaves WWE match. And again, like we talked about, they had Dusty Rhodes at Royal Rumble 91. Why didn't they just have him appear at WrestleMania 7? You had Ric Flair appear at Royal Rumble 93 and then have a loser leaves town match the next night, and you have WrestleMania 2 months away. And Flair was still under contract at the time. I don't think it wasn't that his contract ran out. WWE chose not to use him. And yeah, you know,
Oh yeah, I don't know
why
what to say in that.
why
Why
not
the hell would
stretch
you
that
use him?
perfect Flair feud to WrestleMania that year? When you look back at some bookings in WWE, it's always perplexing because you wish that you knew behind the scenes what the thought process was about why not, extend that to this pay-per-view, or why did this feud never have a blow off? You know.
Yeah, it's very consistently perplexing, especially in hindsight.
Yeah. So I'll throw out this week's random wrestler, and then we could both give our opinions and memories on this person. And let's see, I'm just going to throw out a random wrestler, and the first one to pop in my head is the Barbarian.
All right. Do you want to go first or?
Yeah, I could go first. The Barbarian had a kind of a quiet but really long career in pro
Yes.
wrestling. And I think it's because he not only did he have a couple different monikers, but also he every time he would come back, he would be a little bit different of a look, and I think that people may not his character never had continuity. Let's say it that way. Like his character when he was in WCW, the Barbarian with Ming, there was no reference to or thought of him being a barbarian for going back years and years with other guys like Powers of Pain. But even when he came back to WWE in, I want to say it was like late 1994, early 1995, and he came back as Sione, a member of the Head Shrinkers, and he always had just your average curtain jerking match. I mean, I don't really think, looking back in my head, I'm running through everything I remember of him. I don't really know if there's any match of his that I would say is more than 1 star. Do you have any memories of the Barbarian? I mean, now I think about it actually real quick, and then I'll throw it to you. I don't think we ever heard the Barbarian speak ever.
Yeah, I don't know. He had Bobby the Brain Heenan on his side in WWF. WCW, I wouldn't think so because for my memories of Barbarian, that he's kind of one of them guys that, like I said, like a good supporting cast where you liked everybody in WWF. Like you wanted to see him in the Rumbles and Survivor Series. But for me, his standout stuff that I enjoyed watching was with Ming when they were the Faces of Fear and late WCW. I just thought they were awesome because they pretty much always had them win because they would, they'd be going against WCW's enhancement talent, usually from the power plant. When you'd see them guys just, plow through the guys on WCW Thunder, it was awesome. And I really liked his finisher, the kick of fear. I thought was awesome, like almost like the pump kick Steve Blackman would do. It just looked bigger and more devastating because the Barbarian was such a beast. And I just thought, yeah, him and Ming were awesome together. Two devastating finishers, guys that didn't talk. They look like, they're foreign dudes. Definitely, not looking like they're from the United States. And, they're just, like I said, great supporting guys were you needed for that role. And he was able to do it, two different tag teams. I would say Faces of Fear much better than when he was teamed up with the Warlord, but no, just enjoyable to watch and part of my 90s nostalgia.
I think my memory of Barbarian, um, or my vivid memory of him, would be WrestleMania 6. He squashed Tito Santana, and the finish of that match was a second uh, rope turnbuckle clothesline where, for the time, he turned Tito inside out. Like Tito, got flipped over. and with the clothesline. This was right around the time, I think, just prior to this, the Powers of Pain had split up, and I think the storyline was that Mr. Fuji sold their contracts, and he sold Barbarian's contract to Bobby Heenan, and he sold Warlord's contract to Slick, because then Warlord wrestled. I believe he wrestled Tito Santana at SummerSlam 1990. So Tito Santana was running through the Powers of Pain, and I believe he jobbed at both shows to each one of the members of that team on consecutive shows. And but Barbarian, yeah, there's not really much memory of him as far as matches, and but I mean, very very long established career in the WWE and in WCW, and stayed around for a long time. And,
Yeah, nothing bad you could say about the guy. Was always there and played, he played his role awesomely. He was always a big powerhouse brute. We always had with the furry trunks and the furry boots and everything. I mean, he's just a cool character.
I have a diamond in the rough match. I believe. Did you give one? I know I brought it up earlier.
Yes, LOD and the Nasty Boys.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Then we went off on the tangent. Mine is going to harken back to what I said earlier. It is going to be Lunger Blaze versus Bull Nakano, SummerSlam 1994. When you watch that match, a couple things that I take notice of. First of all is Lunger Blaze gets her fucking ass beat really good and takes some hellacious bumps that the girls nowadays maybe are just now starting to take them, but you really had a feeling that Alundra Blaze was getting her ass kicked, and the crowd was into it. It was very hot, and you had that great dynamic of the Barbie doll versus the Beast, and it worked, and the crowd was very into the finish, and Alundra Blaze walked out of there as WWE Women's Champion. But great match that I would definitely recommend. If you haven't seen it, if you got some time, throw it on a network. I think it's only about maybe a 12-minute match, so it's worth your time though, and the great commentary by Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler, of course. But anything else you want to add this week, Joe? Any ideas or topics you want to discover?
Oh yeah. Well, I was thinking since we're a little short on guests this week, maybe we could save for next week our random wrestler experiences from meet and greets and everything.
Sure.
But what I would like to say is condolences to the family and friends of Balls Mahoney, who was closer, like we talked about Blackjack Mulligan earlier, where I don't have a strong connection to, but just, respect. What now getting into Balls Mahoney, I was a fan of because of the ECW. And I thought, I always heard that Balls Mahoney was a really great wrestler before, like in the indies when he was in territories outside of ECW. But when he was in ECW, he was known, as just a chair wielding badass. And him and Axel Rotten, I thought, were a great tag team. And I used to love when they would hit their chairs together, like they were kind of dueling with swords, and the crowd would chant balls as he would punch people in the face and do the wind up, knock them down. And one of the other main things I liked about Balls Mahoney was being in ECW back in 1998 when I got into it. And that was also the year when I was super into heavy metal and Marilyn Manson in particular. And Balls used to almost always wrestle in the American flag Marilyn Manson shirt, which I still own to this day, and it just made him super cool to me, much like the Headbangers in WWF. But Balls and Axel, coming out too to, I believe their theme song was AC/DC, one of their songs. They were just awesome. I mean, ECW, how I got exposed to it just out of the blue by my dad running in my room to tell me, hey, some wrestling's on, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and being just completely obsessed with ECW after that. I mean, I was hooked instantly, and I know heard that Balls Mahoney led a pretty rough life after ECW, a lot of demons and all, but none of that stuff matters once you've passed on, and just look back on the good he did in the world.
I don't have much of a memory of Balls Mahoney. I was not an ECW mark at all. I caught very little of it when it aired at the time, and I don't know. It wasn't that I didn't think that the product was just interesting, but I've always been the kind of person that I think has been analytical at the time that I'm watching wrestling. And I remember like watching the cruiserweights in WCW in 97, like 96, 97. And I remember thinking it was awesome. But then I also, like, as a fan and understanding that wrestling was predetermined, but you're selling it on this concept that it was legitimate competition. I remember being bothered immediately from watching Rey Mysterio and Dean Malenko matches of Mysterio or Malenko getting repeatedly powerbombed and then kicking out and then jumping right to their feet and going at it. And then in the main event, I'm supposed to buy a powerbomb finishing the match from Kevin Nash. And so when I watched ECW, it was almost kind of like the same thing. It was like I looked at it with the skeptic's eye as like, are they going to expose the business and damage WWE, the large company, the largest company of the industry, because they're going to do things that are going to cause WWE product to look lesser than. In the end, the byproduct was what WCW and ECW both did was twofold. It made the main event guys in WWE step up their game, and it also had its downfall because you had guys like Kurt Angle that were performing maneuvers that were putting their longevity of their career in danger, but they were doing it to try and keep up with what was expected from the crowd. So I wasn't a big ECW guy, and as far as Balls Mahoney go, I knew of him. I knew of his tag team and things of that nature, but I was not a big ECW fan, though. But that's how that goes. But everything that was said this week that I heard from people, they loved him, and everybody on the podcast didn't have anything bad to say, whether it was Brett or anybody who may have commented on it, or Russo. Yeah. Speaking of podcasts, what are some podcasts that you listen to, and what are your favorites?
Well, let's see. I'm going to start from what got me into listening to wrestling podcasts, and that's going to be The Art of Wrestling with Colt Cabana. That was the gateway of getting into wrestling podcasts. And the funny thing about that was I was just barely discovering who Colt Cabana was in the last 2 years, even though he's been wrestling for much longer than that, probably about, I'd say, over 15 years now. But my buddy Miguel, who joined us on the podcast last week, he got me to go to an indie show and check Colt Cabana out, and it was Revolution Pro Wrestling in Chicago, and from there on, I was just like, he's hilarious. I thought he was a hell of a good wrestler. Then I found out about his short stint in WWE, and then just from there started with that podcast. Then it got into Austin's, Jericho's. I like both of them to some point, depending on who their guests are. I mean, they're hit or miss. Both of them guys at shows are hit or miss with me. Then after that, I would say I really enjoy Ric Flair's podcast. I think that's super honest and as honest as it can be, considering he's under a contract with his daughters as well. And then I like MLW podcast with Court Bauer, Conan, and MSL and Sullivan. And my current favorites are the Laws, John Pollock and Wei Ting, for their reviews of Monday Night Raw and their Wednesday edition of Review Away, where they review classic wrestling shows.
Yeah, of course, I listen to Live Audio Wrestling. It's probably my top podcast that I enjoy. But just recently, I've been coming across some podcasts that I've discovered that I was not listening to before, but I enjoy. One of them is Wrestling Soup. I think that the guys on Wrestling Soup are just absolutely hilarious, and their shows usually are just a laugh fest for me. And I'm always excited when I see my Player.fm app has downloaded a Wrestling Soup podcast, because I know that for the next hour or so, sometimes much longer, because they do go really long sometimes, it's going to be very entertaining. So that one is pure entertainment. For wrestling talk, I love Live Audio Wrestling. I love Wrestling Inc. with Vince Russo. Um, I enjoy how he gives a writer's perspective to the current storylines and how he would do things a little bit differently to spice them up. And he doesn't necessarily spice them up in a way that brings it back to the Attitude Era, but just something that will give it a little bit more drama. And I enjoy listening to that. Another one I like listening to is WrestleZone Radio. They have a daily podcast. Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez. I'm a subscriber and I listen to their podcasts daily. And then also Mat Men is a podcast that I listen to. Very entertaining. I find them to be very funny. Not as funny as Wrestling Soup, but their production value is very good, and their commentary on characters and wrestlers is definitely worth listening to. And then finally, Cheap Heat, which is a podcast, very high production value. I believe they're ESPN personalities, and so they're able to use their contacts to have a lot of good people on the show. They just had a show this week where Jonathan Coachman joined them for the entire 1 hour plus to review Raw, and definitely worth a listen. So those are podcasts I generally listen to, and but the one that I look forward to the most is Live Audio Wrestling and the John Pollock and Wei Ting review of Raw. Those are the ones that I can't wait to show up in my podcatcher.
Well, same here. Tuesday and Wednesdays are the best days of the week for the sake that Pollock and Ting put out new material.
Absolutely. Well, do we have anything else, Joe, or are we about done for this week?
Yeah, I was just going to throw in one last plug for Jim Cornette's podcast. Like, he's another one. He's beyond hilarious, and I love his insight on all things wrestling. Whether I agree with him or not, I like listening to him because he truly believes in everything he says, and he loves wrestling so much that he'll defend it. He would probably defend it if it meant giving up his life. And then I was just going to ask you, have you given the Edge and Christian show a chance yet?
I was not aware that they had a podcast. Is this on Podcast One?
Oh no, I'm sorry, on the WWE Network, not a podcast.
Oh, the Edge and Christian show. I have watched
totally Reeks of Awesomeness. Yeah,
I think I've watched 2 episodes. I watched the one where they did the tournament of bad with just bad, horrible gimmicks or whatever.
Very lackluster episode. Yes.
Yeah, I just my intention is to watch it more. I just haven't, but yes, I definitely.
I was just bringing it up because this week's episode was fantastic. I think this is the one that really, I mean, they were getting to, being a solid show where everything is, consistently funny. They do a lot of stuff that kind of they throw it out there, and then if it sucks, it sucks. But the most recent episode on the network was hilarious, and I highly recommend that. It's a good 30 minutes to kill, and it stands out compared to the previous 6 episodes.
I'm definitely going to give that a watch probably when we get off here. And that's it. So I appreciate everybody for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at OWW Podcasts. Don't forget to visit our website, obsessedwithwrestling.com, where you can find interesting articles that we write and put up there analyzing things about WWE and pro wrestling. Our Facebook page, Obsessed with Wrestling on Facebook. And that's about it. So we will see you guys next week at 10 o'clock Central. We'll see you. Bye.